Living in the Past is a Turtle, Mysteries of Azeroth, and Everlook Broadcasting production. This is Living in the Past, your Everlook Broadcasting Company weekly show about all things Turtle, Mysteries of Azeroth. Today is Friday, April 5th, 2024, and I'm Dan, your host for the next hour. We have quite a bit to talk through here today, especially in our first segment. Normally I'm like, okay, we're going to have one set of patch notes. We have two, and you know what? That's okay. Technically, we actually have three to work through, but there wasn't any update on the third one. The third one is just the same alternative tier set news that we've had since December. So we only have two sets of patch notes we actually need to go ahead and talk through. I don't think people were paying too much attention about the second set of patch notes, though. So this is going to be news to some of you. So the regular patch notes first in our first segment, and then some Karazhan patch notes, 117.2, and then finally, we'll talk about the music for this week before we get into our first break. For our second segment, we're going to be talking Karazhan lore. A lot of people really don't care about what happened with Karazhan, especially during Warcraft 1, and if anything happened afterwards. So let's go ahead and take a little time today to talk about Karazhan itself. And then for our third segment, we're just doing a little bit of cleanup. Some updates over on the Everlook Broadcasting Company YouTube page. The new Karazhan-related radio segments that you all have been hearing on this station. And finally, some congratulations and good lucks out to close out the broadcast. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into these patch notes. So these patch notes that we're starting with, at least, are from April 3rd. There's a few things in here. There's a few things in here that are honestly, important. The biggest one, and this really is the biggest one, they finally did fix the 32 buff client cap. So even if you go over 32 buffs, they will always function. And they include that even if there's no aura slot available. I'm not sure exactly how that relates to this overall, but the fact of the matter is that if you go over 32 buffs now on your character, nothing's going to get bumped off, nothing's going to get cut off. Everything is going to work just as it should be. And thank goodness. Thank goodness for that too. They also did fix an issue where mobs were dropping Scourge Stones without required trinkets equipped. That's actually surprising. I had never heard of that one before. But then, Turtle does a lot of things you don't hear of before. That's the beauty of it. So you know what? All bets are off. We also did see an issue fixed with the Argent Dawn Commission auras occupying 2 slots instead of 1, and bonuses failing to apply after death. That's an odd one. So let's say you wipe in Stratholme, and you still have your Argent Dawn trinket equipped, but it doesn't reapply. That is odd. The other big one here, they fixed an issue with AoE healing spells. The example they use is Holy Nova, where the healing wasn't actually applying to people within range of it, but not within line of sight. That's been fixed. So AoE healing from spells like Holy Nova will now have their healing applied correctly even if there is a line of sight issue of some kind. The other thing, and a lot of you picked up on this, like, that's odd. What's going on with that? A lot of you picked up on this on the forums from when Torta posted these up on Wednesday. The image, like the fun splash image for the patch notes at the very top of the forum post, is from Karazhan, and not a section we've been in yet, at least on Turtle. It's from the library set of models, the very tall dragonkin, the bipedal ones, with, I think, some kind of axe in his hand. And a lot of you on the forums asked, hey, is that Upper Karazhan? So, hey, patch 117.2, which is still a work in progress, is now officially titled Tower of Karazhan. And we know a little more about what's going inside it. Now, to be fair, this post has actually been up since December 28th of last year, so just about 3.5 months. However, it has been updated, and I'm going to say updated pretty dramatically. Some of this stuff we already knew. The new trade skill windows, we knew that was coming, but now we get to see exactly what it is, and it does look pretty spiffy. We get to see the spell book with the new toy category, the tab rather. We knew that was we knew what that was going to look like though. We knew that the alternative tier sets would now be included in that, and now there's a link on this post to that. We can see some new character customization options, including some use of older models. Like, there's some new model work, especially for trolls here. And I'll say blood elves. Or high elves. Apologies. Quel'Dorai out there. High elves. But orcs looking good with that new hairstyle. And then the two human models, the two human female models in particular, this is actually calling up older assets from earlier stages of vanilla, from my understanding. I recognize the one on the right, the darker-haired model. That one was absolutely an older model that really did not get used as an asset after a certain stage in WoW Vanilla's development. So not only is Turtle pulling new ideas and new concepts, they're actually digging back into some older models and older concepts and pulling those in as well, which you love to see. I really like this. I shouldn't have to say this, but make sure you go over to the Turtle forums when you can and check out the 117.2 post. Again, that's what we're going through right now. It is called Tower of Karazhan. And the reason it's called that is because new raid, Upper Karazhan. So the tease in the April 3rd patch notes, this is kind of what it's following up to. They did tease a new profession of some kind. We don't really know anything about it yet. They added a little bit of flavor in this post to what we can expect without giving any details for this profession, but they did mention it. The other big thing here in the Tower of Karazhan post is all the new information about vanilla dungeons. The vanilla dungeon update, we've gotten so much more information on. So, Dead Mines. 2 new areas have been added with 1 new boss in each. Those bosses are Jared Vess, who oversees a dangerous lab producing Zanzil's mixture. I don't know why Zanzil's mixture is being involved here, by the way. I don't know the story behind this. As far as I've ever known, Zanzil's mixture has nothing to do with Deadmine. So they're creating some new stories here that I don't actually know about. The other boss is a Masterpiece Harvester, which is described as a relic from Deadmine's past that the goblins are just waiting to wake up. Also, apparently, Raxor's loot pool has been adjusted for this, with notable upgrades. Wailing Caverns, 2 new areas have been added. One of those areas being just a overgrown mess. What is it called? I think it's literally just called the Overgrowth, with some kind of life monstrosity in there. The other part of Wailing Caverns is the Kolkar's Birthright. And this is going to be a heavy centaur area with a boss called Zandara Windhoof. Kolkar have sent an expedition to the depths of the caverns and have established a camp with the intention, of cementing it as a stronghold for the centaur in the Barrens. Also, Lady Anacondra's loot in Wailing Caverns has been updated as well, similar to Raxor. Shadowfang Keep, they've added a chapel. I don't want to call it like a full-on church. In the screenshot, it looks much more like a small chapel. But there is a spectral priest boss there named Prelate Ironmane, a Gilnean priest, which will be the new optional boss. By the way, I should mention, from Turtle's description of all this stuff, these bosses are all optional. You don't necessarily have to take these paths, but obviously, anything that Turtle adds is going to have decent loot on it. So, even if you're just doing a normal, okay, I need to get this character in here, I need to get my Wailing Caverns quest done, it's still going to be a good idea to do these sections, do these added pieces of loot, because these drops are probably going to be decent. And then, to close up this part of the update, Scarlet Monastery is getting a host of new bosses and areas. The graveyard is going to have a prison complex underneath the torture chambers, where the Knight of Naxxramas, harbinger of the Dread Citadel, has been captured and has been tortured and experimented on. But he does want blood. He wants blood. For the library, a new Brother Steelfist has been added. And apparently he's the one training all the monks to silence the crap out of your healers. So if you want to blame anyone, now you get to blame him. And then for the armory, a new area with 2 new bosses has been added. And this definitely looks like more of the armory side of the armory. The Nameless Experiment, a living blade forged from the unholy combination of rune forging and infusion of light, it thirsts for combat. I hear it thirsts for combat in the Zealot voice from StarCraft 2 in my head. She-House. Then you also have Master Smith Johanna, which I assume is a reference to Johanna the Crusader from Diablo 3, but that's me making an assumption. The craftsman behind the Crusade's powerful armaments, fueled with the same zealous flame all Scarlets possess. I like these. I like these new bosses. I'm going to be a little judgmental of the Nameless Experiment, because that's not how rune magic works. So I'm going to be a little judgmental of that, depending upon how, I'm going to say, ridiculous it is. But otherwise, I really like these. I really do like these. So, once again, I would encourage every single one of you to head over and check out the 1.17.2 patch notes, how they've been updated, a lot of the images that have been added to this. I like the character customization a lot. A lot of this looks really good. Trade skill window, now that we get to see it, Looks really good. And there are a host of other changes that are coming in under general fixes at the bottom of this post. I'm not going to go through all of these. There's too many of them to take the time on. However, at the very bottom, it says, "Beware the blue child, for its light may herald the dawn of a new age or the twilight of our own." So for those that don't know, Azeroth has 2 moons. These are described, at least to the Shu'Halo, or Tauren, as the eyes of the Earth Mother. Or at least the sun and the moon are. This third one, the blue child, is an anomaly. The Tauren describe it as, I don't remember this one exactly, but I do believe it's some kind of tier or some kind of offset of the eyes of the Earth Mother. I need to brush up. This one actually took me by surprise. I need to brush up on my lore on this. The Night Elves have a different story behind the blue moon, and I cannot for the life of me remember it. But this one I'm not sure about. And had I had more time in preparing for today's show, I would have actually looked this up. Because I don't know it like well enough off the top of my head. So, if you know why we must beware the blue child, let's hear it. Let's hear your theories. I want to know what you think the blue child heralds. Shout about it in World Chat. Post up on the forums about it. I'm very curious. I'm curious what people think this has to do. With that being said, though, we need to go ahead and get to our music for today. We're going Fallout vibes today. In celebrating the origins of Everlook Broadcasting Company, we're going to go Mr. New Vegas. And that means for this first break of the day, it's going to be Dean Martin with Ain't That a Kick in the Head, the Fallout 76 cover of Country Roads, and Dion's The Wanderer. Coming up after this, we're going to take a look at the lore and history of Karazhan, since it's on the front of so many of our minds. We'll dive right into it, starting with its origins in Warcraft 1. More Living in the Past with myself, Dan, coming up right after this. The musical tracks for this episode have been removed due to YouTube copyright. To listen to the full episodes with music, tune in to Everlook Broadcasting every Friday with the in-game radio widget. Welcome back to Living in the Past with myself, Dan. It's good to have you back here on this Friday. For our second segment here today, we're going to talk just a little bit about Karazhan. You've heard me say the word about, I'm going to say 70 billion times today already. And you know what? We're actually going to do something with it. It's not just the name of a patch, and coincidentally the name of an instance and a smaller raid. It's also a location. It's also a location with a lot of history, but also a lot of history that has been, I'm going to say, refactored multiple sets of times. So what we're going to do is we're going to peel back those layers. We're going to, I'm going to say, rip the Band-Aid off, pull back those layers, and talk about what actually is important when it comes to Karazhan. Because there's been so many additions. So many additions, as I have to deal with very aggressive cats this morning. Both of the kids, Conan and Sonia, are being terrors as I'm trying to record this. Thank you, both of you. Getting back to the point. The history of Karazhan begins with the fact that Karazhan exists. Now, you could say, based on what happened in Legion and with the Scythe of Elune, or I'm sorry, not the Scythe of Elune, but Uthalash, the Deadwind Harvester, that, okay, there's history before that, but I'm going to be honest, I don't respect a lot of that implemented lore after the fact. Well, sometimes I do with certain things, but in this situation with Karazhan, people, and specifically a lot of the WoW writers, have tried to do so much random stuff. I wanted to say another word that starts with S there, but I'm trying to keep it professional. They've tried to do so much random stuff with Deadwind Past and Karazhan. And I'm going to be honest, I don't really respect any of it. So, the history of Karazhan, if we're taking it back to Warcraft 1, begins with the fact that Karazhan exists. I'm not sure if Egwin ended up actually setting it up. There is the whole, okay, Egwin set it up 600 years before the First War. It is on a known nexus of ley lines. It is a location of importance. It was kind of that first magical location before Dalaran even existed. It wasn't necessarily like the first mage tower because, good lord, there were probably mage towers spanning back thousands of years. However, it's kind of the biggest and strongest mage tower, if that makes sense. So, in Warcraft 1, you have the story of Medivh, of this child coming into this immense power, but also then being possessed by a demon. And that possession leading to the opening of the Dark Portal, where Medivh and Gul'dan work together to bind the rift, open it, stabilize it, and eventually allow actual orcs to traverse through it. A few at first, just to explore, and then over time building up more and more forces. That happens. And then Stormwind realizes it. They realize, okay, Medivh might have gone off the deep end. We really need to do something about that. So Lothar, oh my lord, my brain stopped. Khadgar and a group of forces from Stormwind enter Karazhan, fight through all of the monsters and the horrors, and kill Medivh. Quote-unquote kill Medivh. He comes back. It was only a little bit of death. He got better. So Medivh does come back in Warcraft 3 temporarily. Just for a little tiny bit of time. However, Karazhan stands where it is. A very long history of bad experiences, murder, death, torture, experimentation, sitting in there in the middle of Deadwind Past for good lord knows how long. Now, that brings us up to the end of Warcraft 1. And you're probably telling yourself, what happens next? So if we're going based off of literally everything that ever happens, you have, of course, the end of The Last Guardian and the Legends comics. I don't even think the Legends comics are still canon. Like, I've never considered them truly canon. I don't think Blizzard considers them truly canon. So the best we can say, and this is kind of unfortunate because I think Warcraft 3, we should have seen some activity with Karazhan, but the fact of the matter is that we have to skip from Warcraft 1 all the way to World of Warcraft. And we have to look at a lot of the hints around the Dark Riders of Deadwind Pass as to what's going on with Karazhan. The nobles of Darkshire, formerly the wonderful city of Grand Hamlet, on the edge of Elwyn Forest, which that section has now been titled Duskwood, start to really be concerned about all the evil that's coming on down on their part of the world. They start to investigate. They don't really do much. There is a much more detailed storyline that comes into play, I believe, in Legion, with that all about the riders of the Dark Riders of Deadwind Pass and the Scythe of Elune. That really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, though, to be honest. Oh no, that might have been Cataclysm that came in, because the Scythe of Elune was never there in the first place. It ends up being a whole thing with Gilneas. No, the Gilneas storyline was first. So it must have been Legion or sometime around that. This is kind of why, especially the stories around Karazhan don't really make sense, because a lot of them try to shoehorn random aspects from other parts of the game and the story into also somehow being involved with Karazhan. But it doesn't have to. They shouldn't have to be. So all we know, all I'm saying, this is what Dan says. All I'm saying they knew, it sounds terrible, was, all right, the Dark Riders keep being seen throughout Duskwood. There's this gloom and death that's sitting over this part of the forest. Something's wrong. We also know that the people of Darkshire are aware that Karazhan is A, bad, and B, sitting on a nexus of ley lines still. But that's kind of about it. We don't really see anything about Karazhan directly until we get to the Burning Crusade. The Burning Crusade obviously gives us the Karazhan raid. Possibly one of the longest raids to ever raid in the history of raids. That was your entire evening. When you were running Karazhan, that was your night. That's all you could do, because good lord, it's probably going to take 3 hours. You're probably going to have some less than stellar raid members in there that are going to cause you to have to stop, explain everything, sometimes repeatedly, and then someone's going to mess up at least a couple times, especially on things like chess or one of the later dragon bosses, that is going to force everyone to do the 15-minute run back. It is your evening. However, we also get to see the inside of Karazhan. And there's so much there. There's so much there from Morose and a lot of the original servants of Medivh to many constructs, inhabitants, invaders, and the fact that at the top of Karazhan is a portal to the Twisting Nether itself. That's huge. It takes forever for people just to get a key to get in. And everyone has to have a key. At least at first. They ended up retconning that one to where, okay, someone just has to have the key to be able to open the goddamn door, and then you're good to go. But there's so much lore to take apart inside Karazhan. And in the end, whatever you're rating as, whether you're Horde or Alliance, you stop Prince Malchezaar and his attempt to bring in Burning Legion invaders into Azeroth through Karazhan. It's a fun raid. Like I complain and whatnot, but it really is a fun raid. Now, there's a few things that go on with Medan and the Scourge invasion and the Dark Riders in another part of the Warcraft manga. I don't think either of those are still are considered canon, not just by myself, but by Blizzard. So the next time we see anything happen with Karazhan, it's actually stepping up all the way to the Return to Karazhan. The Return to Karazhan was a nostalgia-infused reminiscence of the original Karazhan raid, broken down into what was called at the time a mega dungeon. There were multiple different instances that people could do. Originally launched as mythic difficulty. You saw a lot of the same bosses, but you also saw some new bosses, Vizdoom the Watcher in particular, and it was all about the Burning Legion wanting to use Karazhan as an anchor for themselves to come into the world as well. A second major portal. It was okay. It was fine. Wasn't nearly as so in my opinion it wasn't nearly as fun as the original Karazhan raid, but that's just me. We do see a lot more story uncorked about Medivh and Khadgar in this, but at the same time we're starting to get into the really like wild west lore, I'll say, where there really aren't a lot of rules or guidelines to follow. People are just writing whatever they can and saying, good, let's slap a new coat of paint on it. Now, for me, that's kind of where the story of Karazhan ends. Not only did I stop playing entirely in Battle for Azeroth, and there were a few things for Karazhan and Battle for Azeroth, but I really I wasn't locked in anymore. But also, again, this is where things start to go really, like, I'm going to say, off the rails. Like, there were so many retcons happening throughout Cataclysm and Legion for Karazhan that I thought things had already gone off the rails for sure, but this is even worse. So, what I think is important is the fact that we know Medivh did a lot of horrible torture and experimentation at Karazhan. Also, we know Lothar Khadgar and a group of other adventurers got in there and stopped him. The scars that left on that area of the world, the fact that it was already a nexus of ley lines and of great power, that's bad. And we get to see kind of the depths of how Turtle is going to be interpreting that on a more vanilla basis, thank goodness, in the Upper Karazhan raid. How bad is it going to be? And I'm so excited to see what all is going on. It's going to be a very high tier of difficulty too, so be ready for that, everyone. It's going to be huge. Let's go ahead and get into our second break of the evening. We're keeping with the Fallout vibes. We want to make Mr. New Vegas proud, so to open this break, we have Big Iron by Marty Robbins, I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire by the Ink Spots. You'll remember them from the original Fallout 3 promotional material. And Nat King Cole with Smile. When we come back, a little bit of cleanup work, talking about the Everlook YouTube page, the new Karazhan radio segments, and a quick shout out to Epoch as they begin their final test today. Our final segment of Living in the Past coming up right after this. The musical tracks for this episode have been removed due to YouTube copyright. To listen to the full episodes with music, tune in to Everlook Broadcasting every Friday with the in-game radio widget. Welcome back to our final segment of Living in the Past with myself, Dan. It's good to have you here tonight. Just a little bit of cleanup here for our final segment before we close up shop and send you off into the wilds of the weekend. We're going to get that done here real quick. The first thing I want to go ahead and remind you all of is the guild shoutouts. We'll be doing our third round of those here on Living in the Past coming up at, I'm going to say, towards the end of the month. I don't want to make them like a, okay, I'm doing them constantly thing, because A, I'm going to be honest, they're a ton of work, because I have to clean up a lot of the spelling and grammatical structure of what you all put out. No offense, but also maybe work on that a little bit. We'll probably be doing that towards, I'm going to say probably the last week this month, just to be on the safe side. I want you all to have plenty of time to keep getting those in. Now, as a reminder of how those work, the week that I'm going to be doing the guild shoutouts here on the show, I'm going to warn you all the week beforehand, just as a reminder, hey, get them in. Because about 3 or 4 days before this show airs, so I'm like that Tuesday, that Wednesday, I'm going to start pulling entries from the guild recruitment channels in the Turtle WoW Discord and getting them prepped for being aired. I want to get a good variety. I always like to get a good variety. So it behooves you to be posting in those channels, whether you're on Telebeam or Nordinar, be posting in those channels that week with your guild shoutouts. Be as specific as possible, too. I like including, the raids people are working on, just to give a good gauge of, where a group is at, what classes and specs you're looking for. Again, specific is always going to be for the best. Be specific. And then also your raid times. Being able to share raid times really enhances that accessibility that allows you to better recruit people who are looking to actually do things in the time that you want them to. So including raid times in your guild shoutouts, huge, huge benefit. Please, please continue to do that. And if you've been doing that, thank you so much. Next up here, we did do a big update over on the Everlook YouTube page, the Everlook Broadcasting Company YouTube page at Everlook Broadcasting Co. And that was with not just about a month worth of episodes of Living in the Past here, but also a look under the shell from earlier in March, where I talked with both Vrograg and Akalix. And we got some wonderful information, especially about the class council out. So if you missed those shows, make sure you head over to the Everlook Broadcasting Company YouTube page and give those a listen. They're also all set up with playlists. They're also set up with tags. So you can pull open those playlists, enjoy them to your heart's content. And certainly, we will be adding to the A Look Under the Shell playlist here this month. Now, with that being said, A Look Under the Shell this month might be a touch delayed. I know Akalix, when I was asking him about, okay, what do you want to talk about this month? When do you want to have it? He wants to sync something up for later this month. So, A Look Under the Shell might be not on the same cadence this month, but might actually be like much later in the month. Our first one was towards the beginning of March, and this is why I want to say this. I want to try and be a little consistent with times, but also, if Akalix has a good reason to be like, hey, Dan, I want to hold off a touch. He's doing it for a really good reason. So I'm excited to hear what that reason is, what he wants to talk about, but look forward to a look under the shell, probably again towards the end of April. We'll see. Obviously, I will keep you all posted depending upon if that's going to be changing. Also, hey, you guys heard some wonderful new bits here on the radio from our wonderful, fantastic staff. You heard one of our new voice actresses getting in there and getting the job done. That's Bella with Karazhan Lore. Good job to her on her first piece. And also the Tower of Karazhan segments that the team has put together here. Sounds amazing. Congratulations to everyone for getting those done. And a lot of people helped out with those. You love to see it. And certainly those are part of our wonderful run-up to the launch of Karazhan. Launch of another Karazhan? I'm not sure how to word that, actually. Either way, we're starting to celebrate that 117.2 potential for launch. I actually don't know when the launch is going to happen, so I'm making a big deal out of this, but I'm actually not that sure. Finally, a quick, wonderful, friendly wave from one private server group to another. Epoch is launching their final test today, and everyone here at Turtle Wow wishes them the absolute best. May your world servers be stable, your databases well organized, and your core holding up to everything that you throw at it. Good luck on your final test, Epoch. We wish you the absolute best. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. Our nostalgia continues even though today's broadcast is at an end. And I hope you enjoyed the show here today. A huge thank you to the Turtle developers, moderators, staff, and volunteers. Without the entire team's hard work and dedication, we wouldn't have this station or server group. An additional thank you to the audio engineers and creators here for the use of their soundtracks they've created, which we use for segment transitions and intro audio. If you'd like to find out more about what I do, I invite you to check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/@thedannation and my series, Ancient Lore, a recapture of the spirit of my original podcast, The Ancient of Lore. Until next Friday, let's keep living in the past.